After weeks of hearing strange sounds, seeing shadows under their doors, and noticing odd behavior, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. During the day, both children seemed normal enough. They'd eat breakfast together, bicker over trivial things like who got to choose a movie or who left the milk out on the counter. But there was something else there, too, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Glances that lasted a fraction too long. Conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered the room. A tension that hung in the air like humidity before a storm. Before we dive more into this story, please tell me your name, where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I watched them more carefully, studied their interactions with the intensity of a detective examining evidence. My daughter seemed more withdrawn than usual, quieter, as if she was carrying a weight she couldn't share. My son was different too, more secretive, more defensive when asked simple questions about his day. And at night, always at night, the pattern continued. The footsteps, the doors, the impenetrable silence. I didn't want to believe what I was thinking. God, I didn't want to go there, to that dark place where terrible thoughts live and multiply. I loved both my children dearly, with every fiber of my being, with the kind of fierce, protective love that only a parent can understand. I trusted them. I had built my entire understanding of our family on that trust, on the belief that we were good people, that nothing truly terrible could be happening within the walls of our home. But the nagging feeling grew stronger, like a drumbeat that starts soft and distant, but gradually becomes impossible to ignore. It pounded in my chest during the day, keeping rhythm with my heartbeat. It echoed in my mind at night, drowning out sleep, turning rest into a restless vigil. Until one night, I could no longer ignore it. I couldn't continue living in the state of uncertainty, this purgatory of not knowing, this hell of imagination running wild without facts to anchor it. So, I did something I never imagined I would do. I set up a hidden camera. Even now, saying those words out loud, I feel the weight of them, the shame and the necessity all tangled together in a knot I can't untie. I'm not the kind of person who spies on their children. I believe in privacy and trust, in giving young people the space to grow and make mistakes and learn. But this felt different. This felt necessary, even as it felt wrong. I bought the camera online, a small, discreet device no bigger than a button, the kind advertised for home security. I told myself it was just that, security, protection, due diligence. I was protecting my children, even if they didn't know it, even if one of them might hate me for it later. The camera arrived in unmarked packaging, and I hid it in my daughter's room during the day while both kids were at school, tucking into the corner of a bookshelf where it would have a clear view of the room but remain invisible to unsuspecting eyes. I told myself it was just a precaution, that I'd simply catch a glimpse of what was really going on. I told myself that in a few days, maybe a week at most, I'd have my answer. I'd see something innocent and mundane, laugh at my own paranoia, remove the camera, and never speak of this moment of doubt to anyone. I'd bury this secret deep within myself and move on, relieved and slightly embarrassed by my overactive imagination. But what I saw, well, that's something I'll never forget. It's burned into my memory like a brand, seared into my consciousness with such intensity that I know I'll carry it with me until my last breath. Some things, once seen, cannot be unseen. Some truths, once discovered, cannot be forgotten or ignored or explained away. I couldn't have known what would unfold that night. How could anyone prepare themselves for a moment like that, when everything you thought you knew is about to be proven wrong? When the foundations of your understanding are about to crack and crumble beneath your feet? What I saw on that footage changed everything. My relationship with my children, my understanding of my family, my sense of safety and normalcy in my own home. The first night after installing the camera, I barely slept. I lay in bed next to my wife, who was blissfully unaware of what I'd done, listening for the sounds I'd come to dread and anticipate in equal measure. And sure enough, around midnight, I heard them, the creak of the door, the footsteps, the click of my daughter's door. My heart hammered in my chest, and I had to resist the urge to jump up, to storm into that room and demand answers right then and there. But I didn't. I stayed in bed, paralyzed by fear and curiosity, waiting for morning when I could review the footage. I'll tell you, I didn't sleep a wink that night. How could I? Every minute felt like an hour, every hour like an eternity. I watched the ceiling, counting cracks in the plaster, following the patterns of shadows cast by moonlight through the window. My mind raced through scenarios, each one worse than the last, each one filling me with a dread so profound I could taste it, metallic and bitter on my tongue. When morning finally came, I felt like I'd aged a decade in a single night. My wife noticed, of course. She asked if I was feeling okay, if I'd slept poorly, if something was bothering me. I lied. I told her I was fine, just stressed about work. Nothing to worry about. Another lie to add to the growing pile. But what else could I do? I couldn't tell her about the camera. Not yet. Not until I knew what we were dealing with. I waited until everyone left the house. My wife to work, the kids to school. I waited until I was completely alone, until the house was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock in the hallway. Then, with trembling hands, I retrieved the camera and connected it to my laptop. The small device felt heavy in my palm, weighted with the truth it contained. I had my suspicions, but nothing prepared me for what I would see when I reviewed the footage. You could imagine something 1,000 times, picture in your mind with vivid detail. But the reality is always different. Reality has a texture, a weight, a specificity that imagination can never quite capture. I opened the file, my cursor hovering over the play button for what felt like an eternity. This was it, the moment of truth. Once I pressed play, there would be no going back to the comfortable ignorance I'd lived in before. I hit play, and the image on the screen froze my heart. The video was clear, far clearer than I'd expected. The infrared night vision cast everything in shades of gray and white, giving the footage an otherworldly quality, like watching ghosts move through a familiar space. The timestamp read 12:17 a.m. For several minutes, nothing happened. The room was still, peaceful, my daughter asleep in her bed, her small form rising and falling with each breath. Then at 12:23 a.m., the door opened. There he was, my son, sneaking into her room once again, moving with a careful precision that suggested practice, familiarity with this routine. He wore his pajamas, his feet bare against the carpet. He closed the door behind him with exquisite care, making almost no sound. And then he stood there, in the darkness of his sister's room, and I held my breath, waiting to see what would happen next. But this time it was different. I saw things I never could have imagined, things that made my initial fear seem almost quaint in comparison. He didn't approach her bed immediately. Instead, he walked to her desk, where she kept her school books and art supplies. He opened one of the drawers, the bottom one, and pulled out something I couldn't quite see in the darkness. He sat down on the floor, cross-legged, and seemed to be working on something, his hands moving with purpose and concentration. The camera didn't just capture their faces. It revealed a secret neither of them knew I was watching. For 20 minutes, my son sat on that floor, completely absorbed in whatever he was doing. Then he returned whatever it was to the drawer, stood up, and did something that made my chest tighten with emotion I couldn't immediately identify. He walked to his sister's bed, not to wake her, not to disturb her, but simply to adjust her blanket, pulling it up over her shoulders where it had slipped down. It was such a tender gesture, so gentle and careful, that I felt tears spring to my eyes without understanding why. Then he left, just as quietly as he'd arrived. The door closed. The room was still again, and I sat there, staring at the screen, my mind struggling to process what I just witnessed. This wasn't what I'd feared. This wasn't the dark scenario my imagination had conjured. This was something else entirely, something I didn't yet understand but instinctively knew was important, significant, perhaps even beautiful in its own strange way. I wasn't just shocked by the visuals. I was shaken to my core by the reality of what I was witnessing, because it challenged everything I thought I knew, not just about my children, but about fear itself, about how our minds can turn innocent things into monsters, how our imaginations can betray us and lead us down dark paths paved with assumptions and worst-case scenarios. I watched the footage 3 more times that day, each viewing revealing new details, new questions. What was he working on? Why the secrecy? Why did he need to do this at night in his sister's room when she was asleep? The questions multiplied, but the fear that had driven me to install the camera in the first place was beginning to transform into something else. Curiosity, certainly, but also a growing sense that I was on the edge of understanding something important about my son, about my family, about the private worlds that exist within the shared space of a home. I couldn't unsee it, and neither will you. The image of my son, sitting on that floor in the darkness, completely absorbed in some secret project, completely unaware that his father was watching from the future, trapped in the amber of digital recording, the tenderness with which he adjusted his sister's blanket, the care he took to be silent, to not disturb her rest. These images are with me now, permanently, indelibly. That night, I watched the live feed. I needed to see more, to understand more. The pattern repeated itself almost exactly. 12:23 a.m. The door opened. My son entered. He went to the drawer, removed the mysterious object, sat on the floor, and worked. But this time, I watched more carefully, zooming in on the grainy footage, trying to discern what exactly he was doing with his hands. It looked like he was drawing or writing or perhaps both. His posture suggested concentration, dedication, the kind of focus that comes from doing something you care deeply about. He would pause occasionally, tilt his head as if considering something, then continue. 20 minutes passed, then 25. Finally, he stood, returned the object to the drawer, adjusted his sister's blanket once more, and left. The third night, I decided I needed to see what was in that drawer. I couldn't wait any longer. The mystery was consuming me, occupying every spare moment of my thoughts. But I also felt a strange reluctance, a sense that by looking, I would be violating something sacred, crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed. Still, I'd already crossed so many lines. What was one more? The next day, after everyone left, I went to my daughter's room. I stood in front of her desk, my hand on the drawer pull, my heart pounding. This felt different from installing the camera. This felt more direct, more invasive. The camera could be rationalized as surveillance, as security. This was pure snooping, pure violation of trust. But I'd come too far to turn back now. I opened the drawer. Inside, beneath some old notebooks and loose papers, I found a sketchbook. It was new, barely used, the kind with thick, high-quality paper meant for serious art. I lifted it out, my hand shaking slightly, and opened it to the first page. What I saw took my breath away. It was a drawing, a portrait, rendered in pencil with exquisite detail and skill I didn't know my son possessed. It was a portrait of our daughter, but not as she was now. It was her as she might be in the future, older, confident, smiling with a joy so genuine it seemed to radiate off the page. The detail was extraordinary. Every strand of hair, every subtle shadow, every highlight in her eyes captured with the precision of someone who had studied their subject with intense love and attention. I turned the page. Another portrait, this one different. Our daughter is a doctor, wearing a white coat, a stethoscope around her neck, the same radiant smile. Another page, her as an artist, paint-splattered apron, brush in hand, standing before an easel. Another, her as a dancer, mid-leap, captured in a moment of perfect grace and freedom. Page after page, my son had drawn his sister's future. He had imagined all the things she might become, all the paths her life might take, and he had rendered each vision with such care, such hope, such obvious love that I found myself crying there in her room, the sketchbook trembling in my hands. After seeing that footage, everything changed. It wasn't just about what I caught. It was about the trust that was broken, the secrets that had been kept. But the trust that was broken wasn't theirs. It was mine. I had broken their trust by doubting them, by assuming the worst, by installing that camera. And the secret that had been kept wasn't dark or sinister or dangerous. It was beautiful. My son was creating something beautiful for his sister, and he was doing it in secret because... Why? Because he was shy about his art? Because he wanted it to be a surprise? Because some gifts are too precious to share before they're ready? I still didn't have all the answers, but I had enough. I had seen enough to understand that what I'd feared was a figment of my imagination, a monster I created from shadows and sounds and my own anxiety. The reality was so much better, so much more wonderful than anything I could have anticipated. Emotional turmoil doesn't begin to describe what I felt in that moment. I didn't know how to feel. Betrayed, certainly, but betrayed by my own mind, my own fears, not by my children. Confused, yes, because I still had questions. Why her room? Why at night? But also overwhelmed with love, with pride, with shame at what I'd done, with relief that my fears had been unfounded, with joy at discovering the secret talent my son had hidden from us. Scared for my children, for the future of our family? Yes, but not in the way I'd been before. Now I was scared that I'd damaged something through my suspicion, that I'd introduced a poison into our family dynamic that couldn't be removed. How could I tell my son I'd been watching him? How could I admit what I'd done without destroying his trust in me forever? I didn't know how to feel. That's the truth of it. I felt everything and nothing all at once. I felt like I'd been turned inside out, every nerve exposed, every emotion amplified to an almost unbearable intensity. Sometimes the truth comes at a price, and that night I paid it. The price was my own peace of mind, my own comfortable assumptions, my own belief that I understood my family. The price was the knowledge that I had doubted my children, that I had suspected them of something terrible when they were innocent. The price was the weight of secret I now carried, what I had done, what I had discovered, and the decision I had to make about what to do next. What do you do when the people you love are hiding something so dark? But that wasn't the right question anymore. The right question was, what do you do when you discover that what you fear was darkness was actually light? What do you do when you realize that the monster you were hunting was your own shadow? I haven't figured that out yet. It's been weeks since I discovered the sketchbook, since I reviewed that footage and understood what my son was really doing in his sister's room every night. I removed the camera that same day, buried it in the back of a drawer, where I'd never have to see it again, a shameful reminder of my own failure to trust. But one thing I know for sure, things will never be the same again. I can't unknow what I know. I can't unsee what I've seen. Every night, when I hear those familiar sounds, the creak of the door, the footsteps, the click of my daughter's door, I know what's happening. I picture my son sitting on that floor, pencil in hand, creating beautiful visions of his sister's future, pouring his love and hope and dreams for her onto those pages. Part of me wants to tell him I know, wants to acknowledge his gift, to praise his talent and his devotion to his sister. But another part of me knows that some secrets are meant to be kept, that some gifts are diminished by being exposed to light too soon. So I stay silent. I listen to those nighttime sounds with different ears now, hearing not something sinister, but something sacred. I've started paying more attention to both my children during the day, really looking at them, really listening to what they say and what they don't say. I've noticed things I missed before, lost in my own fears and assumptions. The way my son looks at his sister, with such fierce protectiveness, the way she seeks his approval, values his opinion more than she lets on, the private language they've developed, the inside jokes, the subtle communication that happens in glances and gestures. They have a relationship that exists independent of me, independent of my wife, independent of our family structure. They have their own connection, their own understanding, their own secrets, and that's exactly as it should be. They don't owe me access to every corner of their lives. They don't owe me complete transparency. They're allowed to have private spaces, private moments, private gifts they give each other. I've thought a lot about fear in the weeks since this all happened, how it distorts our perception, how it transforms innocent things into threats, how it makes us act in ways we later regret. I let my fear drive me to violate my children's privacy, to doubt their innocence, to assume the worst. And while I'm grateful that what I discovered wasn't terrible, I'm ashamed that I needed proof, that my trust wasn't strong enough to withstand a few unexplained nighttime visits. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? I ask myself this question constantly, turning it over in my mind like a stone in my palm. Would you have acted sooner? Would you have simply asked your son what he was doing, trusting him to tell you the truth? Would you have ignored it, chalked it up to harmless sibling bonding? Or would you have done exactly what I did, unable to rest until you had answers, unable to trust your own children without evidence? Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation? A moment where your fear and love collided, where your desire to protect your children made you do something you knew was wrong? A moment where you had to choose between trust and certainty, between faith and facts? These aren't easy questions, and they don't have easy answers. But they're the questions I'm living with now, the questions that keep me up at night almost as much as those footsteps once did. I think about what I'll do when my son is ready to share his gift, when he's finished whatever project he's working on and decides to give it to his sister. Will I pretend to be surprised? Will I act as though I'm seeing these drawings for the first time, as though I don't already know about the doctor and the artist and the dancer? Will I be able to give him the genuine reaction of joy and pride he deserves without it being tainted by my knowledge of how I came to see his work? Or should I confess? Should I tell him what I did, apologize for my lack of trust, and accept whatever consequences come from that admission? Would that be the braver choice, the more honest choice? Or would it just be me trying to ease my own guilt at the expense of his trust? I don't have the answer to that yet either. Maybe there isn't a right answer. Maybe this is one of those situations where every choice comes at a cost, where there's no clear path forward, only a series of imperfect options, each with its own consequences. What I do know is that I've learned something about myself through this experience, something uncomfortable but important. I've learned that I'm capable of doubting the people I love most, that my fear can override my faith, that I can act in ways that contradict my deepest values when I'm scared enough. That's a hard truth to face, but it's a necessary one. I've also learned something about my children. I've learned that they have depths I haven't fully appreciated, talents I didn't know existed, relationships and rituals that have nothing to do with me. And that's okay. That's good. Even they're becoming their own people, with their own lives, their own secrets, their own ways of loving each other. As a parent, isn't that what I want? For them to be independent, to have meaningful relationships, to be capable of loving deeply and expressing that love in creative ways? If you want to know more about what happened after I uncovered the truth, I'm not sure there's much more to tell. The nights have continued in the same pattern. My son still visits his sister's room around midnight. He still sits on that floor, working on his drawings. He still adjusts her blanket before he leaves. And I still lie awake, listening, but now with a full heart instead of a fearful one. Life has settled into a new normal, one where I carry the secret knowledge, this understanding of my son's nocturnal artistic practice. Sometimes I catch myself watching him during the day, looking for signs of the artist I now know he is. And sometimes I see it, the way he observes people, really looks at them, taking in details most of us miss. The way his fingers sometimes move unconsciously, as if drawing in the air. The way he tilts his head when he's studying something, the same gesture I saw in that footage. I wonder he'll pursue art seriously, if this is just a phase or the beginning of a lifelong passion. I wonder what he'll think when he's older and looks back on this time, these secret midnight drawing sessions in his sister's room. Will he remember them fondly? Will he be embarrassed? Will he understand how much love they represented, how much hope and faith in his sister's future? And what about my daughter? Does she know? Has she found the sketchbook? Or is she truly asleep during these visits, completely unaware that her brother is creating this beautiful gift for her? I want to ask her, but I can't, not without revealing my own knowledge, my own violation of their privacy. Sometimes the people we love most hold the most secrets. I understand that now in a way I didn't before. We all have private selves, hidden corners of our hearts and minds that we don't share with everyone, maybe not with anyone. And that's not a bad thing. That's not something to fear or suspect or try to expose. Those secrets are part of what makes us human, part of what makes us interesting and complex and capable of surprising even the people who know us best. But it's not just about what's hidden. It's about how we deal with the truth once it's out in the open. And that's where I'm stuck, in that liminal space between knowing and revealing, between understanding and acknowledging. The truth is out in the open for me, but not for anyone else. I'm the only one who knows what I did, what I discovered, what I learned. And I have to decide what to do with that knowledge. Do I take it to my grave, never telling another soul about the camera or the drawings or any of it? Do I wait until my son shares his gift and then privately confess what I did? Do I tell my wife, share this burden with her, get her perspective on what I should do next? Do I talk to my children directly, have a conversation about privacy and trust and the mistakes parents make when they're scared? I don't know. I truly don't know. And maybe that uncertainty is okay. Maybe I don't need to have all the answers right now. Maybe some questions are meant to live with us for a while, to percolate and evolve as we do, until the right answer emerges naturally, in its own time. What I do know is that I love my children more than I did before this all started, if that's even possible. Seeing my son's devotion to his sister, his artistic vision, his capacity for this kind of sustained, loving secret project, it's expanded my understanding of who he is, revealed dimensions of his character I hadn't fully appreciated. And it's made me more aware of my daughter, too. Made me think about her future in new ways. Wonder which of my son's visions might come true. Or she'll surprise us all by becoming something neither of us imagined. I've become more patient, too. More willing to sit with unknowing. To trust that things will unfold as they should even when I don't have complete information. The old me, the me from before the camera, would have needed immediate answers, would have demanded explanations, would have controlled and managed and tried to understand everything. The new me is learning to let go, to trust, to accept that mystery is not the same as threat. But let me be clear, I'm not proud of what I did. Installing that camera was wrong, a violation of trust that I can never fully undo. The fact that what I discovered was beautiful doesn't erase the ugliness of my actions. The fact that my fears were unfounded doesn't justify having acted on them the way I did. If I could go back, would I do things differently? I want to say yes. I want to believe I'd have the courage to simply ask my son what he was doing, or the faith to trust that whatever it was okay. But I don't know. Fear is a powerful motivator, and in that moment, I was very afraid. What I can do is learn from this experience, carry these lessons forward, try to be better. I can remember what it felt like to doubt my children, and resolve never to let fear override trust that way again. I can remember the relief and joy and shame I felt when I discovered the truth, and use that complex emotional cocktail to guide future decisions. I can be more aware of how my imagination can run away from me, how I can construct elaborate narratives of disaster from the smallest seeds of uncertainty. And believe me, the truth is much harder to face than you think. Not because the truth itself is terrible. In this case, it was wonderful. But because the truth includes what I did, who I was in that moment, what I was capable of. The truth includes the fact that I distrusted my own children, that I spied on them, that I was willing to invade their privacy because I couldn't handle not knowing. The truth includes my own flaws and failures and weaknesses, and those are hard things to acknowledge and accept. Living with this knowledge has changed me in ways I'm still discovering. I'm more humble now, more aware of how little I actually know about the people I live with, the people I love. I'm more careful about my assumptions, more hesitant to jump to conclusions, more willing to sit with uncertainty. I'm also more appreciative of the small moments, the everyday interactions that reveal character in subtle ways. Every morning at breakfast, when my son and daughter sit across from each other, trading playful insults and fighting over the last of the orange juice, I see them differently. I see the depth beneath the surface, the love that expresses itself in teasing and in secret midnight drawing sessions. I see a bond that's stronger than I realized, a relationship that doesn't need my management or understanding to thrive. And every night, when I hear those familiar sounds, the creak, the footsteps, the click, I close my eyes and smile. I picture my son on that floor, pencil moving across paper, creating beautiful visions of his sister's future. I picture him adjusting her blanket with such gentleness, such care, and I feel grateful. Grateful that this is what was happening all along. Grateful that my children are who they are. Grateful that I know, even though I shouldn't, the weight of this secret gets lighter sometimes, heavier others. On good days, it feels like a gift, this hidden knowledge of my son's talent and devotion. On bad days, it feels like a burden, a reminder of my own failure to trust. But it's always there, always part of me now, woven into the fabric of who I am and how I understand my family. I think about the future often now. I think about the day my son will give his sister that sketchbook, if that's what he's planning. I imagine her face when she sees it, the pages and pages of beautiful drawings, all the different futures he's imagined for her. I imagine her understanding, perhaps for the first time, how much her brother loves her, how much faith he has in who she might become. It will be a moment of grace, a moment of revelation, a moment I'm not supposed to witness but desperately want to. And I think about my own future, about the kind of father I want to be going forward. I want to be the kind of father who trusts first and questions later, the kind who gives his children the benefit of the doubt, who assumes the best rather than fearing the worst, the kind who respects their privacy, their autonomy, their right to have parts of themselves that belong only to them. I'm not there yet. I'm still learning, still growing, still trying to be better than I was. This whole experience has taught me that parenting is not about control or complete understanding. It's about love and trust and faith and letting go. It's about accepting that your children will surprise you, that they'll have depths you don't fully comprehend, that they'll grow into people you couldn't have predicted. And that's beautiful. That's exactly how it should be. So I carry this secret, this knowledge I was never meant to have. I carry it gently, carefully, try to learn from it without being crushed by it. And I move forward, one day at a time, trying to be present, trying to trust, try to love my children for who they are rather than who I imagine them to be or fear they might become. The nights continue. The pattern persists. My son still visits his sister's room, and I still listen, but now I hear it differently. I hear love. I hear art. I hear the private language of siblings who don't need their parents to understand everything they do. I hear the future being sketched in pencil on thick paper, being imagined with hope and drawn with love. And in the quiet of those nights, in the space between hearing the footsteps and knowing what they mean, I find a kind of peace. Not the peace of complete understanding. I'll never have that. But the peace of acceptance, of trust, of letting go of the need to know everything. The peace of a parent learning that their children are more than they imagined, better than they feared, capable of love and creativity that exists independent of parental knowledge or approval. This is where I am now. This is where my story has brought me. Not to a neat conclusion, not to a moment of perfect resolution, but to an ongoing negotiation between what I know and what I'll do with that knowledge, between who I was and who I'm trying to become, between the fear that drove me to install that camera and the love that now lets me hear those nighttime sounds without anxiety. The truth is out there, hidden in a drawer in my daughter's room, sketched across pages she may or may not know exist. The truth is in my heart, in my memory, in the knowledge I carry. The truth is in the sounds I hear each night and what they mean. And I'm learning to live with all of it. The beauty and the shame, the love and the violation, the mystery and the revelation. This is my story. This is what happened when I let fear override trust, when I installed that camera and discovered something wonderful in the process of doing something terrible. I don't know how it ends yet. Maybe it doesn't end. Maybe this is just a chapter in a much longer story, one that will continue to unfold in ways I can't predict or control. But for now, this is enough. Knowing is enough. Loving them is enough. Try and be better is enough. And listening to those footsteps each night, knowing what they represent, feeling grateful and ashamed and hopeful all at once. That's enough too. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Kindly like this video if you find it helpful, comment and share your thought, and subscribe to this channel as part of your great support and motivation to us.